I am drinking coffee in April in Leuven, which is the city in Belgium where I went to college. I'm with my sister. She drove all the way back from home to come visit me. So I see this friend drive by, and she sees me. She stops. She says hi. We chit chat, and then she looks at my sister. And then, as a normally functioning human being, I introduce them, and there it is. Like this really awkward moment. Like it's a tenth of a second, but I've seen this moment so many times that I just recognize it. And she just says, "Hi, nice to meet you," and just continues. So my sister doesn't have like a physical distinctive feature or anything. She's actually pretty, which is an annoying detail if you ask me. But the situation is that my sister is Caucasian, she's blonde, and she has blue eyes. And sometimes gray, depending on the weather, something I never understood. And I'm not, obviously. So what's the big deal? Like, we're in the 21st century, adoption, like, is this a story of this confused, adopted African girl that doesn't find herself in an all-white environment? Not really. So months ago, like a month before that, when I met that girl, when I moved into my dorm, I was with my mom, who looks like me, because I understand now it can be confusing. So I introduced myself. Hi, I'm this, I'm 17, I'm so excited to start law school. And my mom mentions that, it's really hard for her and she's struggling to see her only child go to university like this and leaving the house. And if she had known that it was so difficult, she would have made like several more babies. Awkward, right? Like, why can't people just lie about those things, Is this like a stud monster that doesn't accept her white husband's kids, or better? Is this a story of an African family that just can't cope with the social pressure, or with all the shit they get because they dare to adopt a white child? Well, what if my mom didn't lie? Let me rephrase that. My mom didn't lie, because I'm her only child. So if you ask me, are you an only child? Yes. My parents had one child, never got remarried. That's me. Do you have a brother and a sister? Yes. I might as well mention right now that I also have a brother. Yeah, because I grew up in a household of 3 kids, and we had a brother-sister relationship, the fighting, and the games, and, everything you do with your brother and sister. So my parents are still adventurous, and they were really fun and very ambitious, young back in the time. And that's how I know my parents. And if you ask their best friends, that's how they would describe my parents. But according to the Belgian government and the general public, my parents and I are part of this large group of immigrants that came from former Belgian colonies to Belgium to find opportunities. And they came to Belgium and they experienced this first generation immigrant life. And quickly they were like, okay, no, we're gonna try to have a more prosperous future for our daughter. And so they came up with this idea of voluntary immersion. That's how I like to call it now. And the idea was to create this environment where I would have enough resources, knowledge, to just grow up and be competitive in society and have enough opportunities and just become who the hell I want to become. And back at that time, my parents were limited resources, and because they were living in this stereotyped, socially weak routine, and they were just in survival mode, they thought they could not offer this. So my mom was 20 when she arrived here with me. I was almost 2, and she arrived by herself because of some circumstances. And she landed in this little village called Olderberg in Heusden-Zolder, and it's absolutely famished. I don't even think 1% of the population there that can speak French or like any other language. So my mom arrives there and she doesn't speak the language. She's like in this maid's room of this larger house that belongs to this elderly couple. And she has her own kitchen, her separate entrance, but she doesn't know anymore. She doesn't know their language, she doesn't have money, and she's like there with her baby. And she befriends their daughter-in-law, Rita, who is on a one-year sabbatical because she wants to take care of her youngest child, her little girl, who was blonde, blue eyes, gray, depending on the weather. And so they became best friends. So Rita shows my mom like everything she had to know about living in Belgium. And they remained friends, even after my mom and I eventually moved out, when my father finally came to Belgium and we got a social housing. And that's actually the origin, because a few years later, my parents went back to Rita and her husband Etienne, and then introduced them to this idea and concept of voluntary immersion. And so the four of them decided to go for a foster care arrangement, because it was the only structure that would fit the situation. And that's how I officially became, from Monday to Friday, daughter of Rita and Etienne, sister of Lisbeth and Serge. And on the weekdays, I was this spoiled little brat, only child of Paunjo and my mother Rebecca. And we did this for years. And why not say she was my foster sister? Like, it would make everything much more easier. And that is actually what my friend said when we went back to the dorm, and we had this open discussion about the situation earlier with all the other friends. And the reason was because I didn't grow up thinking she was my foster sister, and I never really related to being a foster kid, and especially not the stereotype, of this kid that was like forcefully put into like this care system, as a temporary solution to this problem. Like, there was no problem in my life. And foster care for us in our situation was just like a formality, like just a way so that Rita and Etienne, my parents, didn't have to call each time my biological parents every time they wanted to enroll me in school or for a sports activity or just an insurance plan. And it was also very efficient for them to not be in jail whenever they tried to get me over the border, just for like vacation in France. So becoming like a foster kid for me didn't make sense. It just took away all this sensitivity and specificities like that were unique to our story, and that I really needed to move on in life, because growing up in between those two families really felt natural, but was kind of hard. And actually, growing up was hard. 90% of the time, the universe, or my environment, or a big part of my environment, was telling me that I didn't look right or I didn't act right. So, in Wilderberghuizen, or in my almost all-white high school, backpacking in Southeast Asia, living here in Campagne, I get in situations and I meet people that, just remind me that, life would be different if I had another color, if I looked different. And they just remind me, like, sometimes that I'm black, as if being black is, this thing, which is annoying. But it was nothing compared to what I really felt when I was actually highly rejected and stereotyped by the African community when I moved to Brussels a few years ago, which was more multicultural. And I had all these people around me looking like me and just telling me like that I didn't act right. So, result, you have that, old-fashioned identity crisis. Who am I? The answer depends on whoever tells you who you are, because most of the time for me, it's people telling me who I am. It depends on what you like to eat. It depends on something you said 5 days ago. It depends how you dress. But it's always like in the spectrum, somewhere in between black, African, Afropean, coconut, white. And it changes every day. So what do you do with this information? You start rejecting stuff that are pretty important for you. You start accepting bullshit that is completely unnecessary. You reinvent yourself. You try to be authentic by, dressing differently, having a different hairstyle, changing your accent, which is crazy because you're trying to be authentic by changing stuff. So definitely not the answer. But what is the answer? Because you still have that question, like, who the heck am I? So I go a few years back. It was several years before my father passed away. I was 12 or a little bit younger, and he brought me to his job. My dad back in the time was like a delivery truck driver. He would drive, and bring these items to businesses in major cities in Belgium. And I remember that, often he would bring those things back, like these gifts. So he would bring like perfume, CDs, toys, bags, cell phones. And I was so excited. I was like, yeah! My mom, she drove her crazy. Like, because she thought, she assumed that he would steal those things, like this, delivery guy, truck driver. And every time he would come back with something, she would yell at him like, what are you doing? Like, you should get your shit together. Like, you're not giving a good example. Like, what, you want to go to jail? Like, you see me go visit you at jail? You want me to become like a wife of like a prisoner? Like, what is wrong with you? And my father was someone very calm. Like, the calmest person. He was like so undisturbed. And he would just look at me play and enjoy myself, and then tell my mom like, calm down, like just relax, which made things worse. So she would yell, and he would then like tell a joke, and then at some point my mom would be like, whatever, I don't need it, whatever, just go away. So that day I'm doing a shift with my dad in this truck, and we are at the first stop. And this guy comes out of this grocery store. He greets my dad, tells him like this phrase that he learned from his uncle who used to work somewhere in Africa in Yoruba. And I look like, okay. So Yoruba is, talking Yoruba to a Congolese is like talking Danish to like a Cambodian. Like, and they're like, yeah. So Danish, Cambodian, and it's like saying like, yeah, you see, and you're like, no, I don't see. And then we go to the second stop, and this guy comes out, and he asks my dad like if he had like some news of his mom's, my grandmother, after this incident in like Senegal. So I look at my dad, and I'm like, we don't even know people from Senegal. Like Congo, Senegal, like. And then the third person, which is a woman, and she asked my dad like if my mom is feeling better, with her health condition. And she gets this discounted luxury scarf, and she gives it to my dad and tells him like, give it to your wife, I hope she feels better soon. And this is what happened the whole day, like not everywhere, but people would just randomly start talking about like this African anecdote or this African, fantasy they had. Give my dad a tip, give him like a discounted or, likely damaged or outdated item, the same that he would bring back home. And we would just continue. And, the names. So they would just give my dad like those crazy names, like James, which I understand, or Ndemba, which also I understand. But then people started calling him like Richard or Patrick. Like my dad's name was Gemma. So I was profoundly confused. And at some point, I was in this truck, and I looked at him, and I said, are we going to address this thing that's going on. Like, I mean, why are these people assuming that you're from those crazy countries? And why do you answer them to those crazy names? And my dad, calm, looks at me, and there's a pause. And, I'm waiting for this moment of enlightenment and like this profound wisdom. And he looks at me and he says, who the hell cares? Like, I told those people my name is Gemma and I'm from Congo. Like, I think they're just confused because they see so many black truck drivers. And he said, ain't nobody got time to like reshape the world or tell them that they're wrong. Like, I need to finish my shift. I don't care. So I am amused. And then I look at my dad and I'm like, yeah, but mom, like, why don't you tell her like you're not stealing those things and just that you received them? And he looks at me and he's like, I love your mom, but she's crazy. And she would never believe me. So I am amused, but still confused. And my dad looks at me and he's like, you know this. I mean, I just wake up, I go to work. I listen, I nod, I smile to all these people. They give me a coffee. They give me some tip. They give me an item I'm not even able to buy. I can't afford. I finish my shift, I go back home, I drive your mom nuts. I tell a joke, she doesn't talk to me, which is not that bad. And what's important is that whenever you're around, you just come like this little puppy and you're like, oh, what did you bring this day? Today? And you're happy, I'm happy, we go to sleep happy, and I did my share of the day. So it was many, many years later when I had that identity crisis that I vividly remembered that moment. And I didn't go and invented myself some alter egos like I was Beyonce or something. But I used those different identities I had and this diverse background and different experiences to just reinvent myself every day. Nobody was wrong. Like one day I would just use my Flemish posh accent just to get the student job. And I used it at, the carte blanche to just go through everything and just to intelligently move through the world. Like here in Southeast Asia, whenever I'm stopped at a border, unnecessarily because I'm black, I just get my Belgian passport and I'm like, I am not African, I am European. You need to let me go. As opposed to foreign royalty or like some rock star. So it's fun, you play with it. But what happens when it's not to get to a beautiful island or you don't get presents at the end? What if one day you wake up and you tell yourself like all Belgians can go and blow themselves up after you read an article that in 1901 only 500,000 Congolese died of the rubber industry in Belgian Congo. And that same morning of the 22nd of March 2016, 3 coordinated suicide bombs explode in Belgium and kill people in those areas where you go every day. Like, what do you say or what do you feel when there is like this public debate about intellectual property rights, about found, discovered, stolen African goods and art that are preserved and exposed in Belgian and other European museums, your favorite museums? Or what do you say when there's this debate about using blackface as a national celebration and the same celebration that you've been celebrating with your entire family for 25 years? And finally, what do you say when you have your woke African friends tell you that your fake foster mom, dad, sister, brother don't love you, never loved you, never will love you, that you're just their social little project and you're just there to help them with their white privileged conscience? And that same week, a friend of yours gets assaulted and almost left for dead by a Congolese gang because that person is white. So what do you do? What do you feel? What did life taught you? So there is this African saying that says, when in this forest branches quarrel, the roots embrace. So whenever I am conflicted and I am in this situation where, I have these stereotyped microaggressions and these social pressures and, prejudices, I was taught to go back to my roots. And not my roots like where do I come from, what influenced me, those are questions that I cannot even answer. No. Roots like your underlying values, moral, something that is true to you and that can help you to go through life. Like for instance, my sensitivity to any form of oppression and racism that will make me use any platform to talk against blackface. Not because I'm Congolese and I grew up in Belgium, no, because I think it's fundamentally wrong to do so. And I use my identity as a Congolese and my experience having lived in Belgium to just, underline it. Or the same reason why I will always love, respect, and be inspired from my family, my entire family, for everything that they taught me. And I will use all these things to defend them and defend my story against the most woke of all of us. What I'm trying to say is that I was taught to go back to my essence, like a father that would take any identity, any name, bullshit from his wife, just to see his daughter smile. Daughter that he sees 2 times a week, whole year round, just so he can offer her a future that is bigger than his? So the answer is, when in the forest, the branches quarrel, the roots embrace. So in this society, in this world, in times of inner conflict, and when you are being confronted by other opinions, other people, what my experience taught me is to go back to, underlying morals that are really rooted in me, and I think are also rooted in other people, and you just embrace it. Thank you.